Thank you for joining us and welcome to episode 1 of the Electrical Distribution Solutions podcast. This episode is brought to you by Space Saver Distribution, or better known as SSDi. In this episode, we're going to discuss our history and our backgrounds in the electrical trade and how we got to where we are today. So let's get this started today with you, Jerry, the founder. Why don't you tell us how you started your journey?
Actually, how I got here was an electrician. I like to be an electrician. I always wanted it. I failed my first test trying to take my electrician to be a journeyman and to try it. I did it again, was successful. They don't tell you how much you passed by, but they tell you how much you flunked by, and that hurt. But did that from Washington State, moved to Las Vegas in 95. I got my first job down here as an electrician with a petroleum company building gas stations. That's what I started with. I used to ride my motorcycle to work. First it started on bus. I used to take a bus every day to work.
It's kind of like the 10 miles in the snow.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember the story about the tools on the bus, and then you graduated to a motorcycle, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I graduated. Yes, but the bus journey was really interesting because I'd have to take the bus trip west to the Strip, get on the Strip, take the bus on the Strip with all the tourists, wearing my work clothes and carrying all my tools, getting to my job so I could get into a truck to drive to a job site. I love that. So I didn't want to do that much more, so I did purchase a motorcycle. I used my motorcycle for years. I loved riding that motorcycle until someone chased me off the road one night, and I said, I'm done. I am not going to be followed by a car and chased off the road and tried to be killed, so I graduated to a car. It was a good choice at the time, so...
That just shows your tenacity and why we're here today with the company as far as it is.
It shows that I liked life. I enjoyed that. So, working for a petroleum company, it was interesting building gas stations. My background was controls because in Washington State, I worked on controls. I worked for the municipality. I worked for private industry. My main job for most of those was controls. Electrician, but controls. Journeyman, always trying to strive to do better. But when I came here, was doing explosion proof again. I did a lot of it in the Port of Tacoma, but
that wasn't fueling there.
No, it was not fueling.
What was that there?
That was all hazardous location for grain elevators.
Ah.
So, and then operations for docking boats and crane controls.
A lot of seagulls.
Seagulls and pigeons.
Yeah, yeah.
Hated the pigeons, so did not like pigeons. But coming here when we were building the gas stations, building these walls for the controls of the dispensers to be able to make all of that happen, I would stand in front of these walls for hours at a time, wiring all these things, wires after wires after wires, trying to put things together to make them operate. And basically, I'm lazy. So I figured there's got to be a better way to do this than standing there with all this time. Went to my background, which was PLCs. Loved PLCs, how they operated. Started out with one of the name brands in the industry. Loved it. So I incorporated that into what we were building. Took a 3 to 4 hour job and dropped it down to about an hour or less, 20 minutes sometimes. Depends on how big the station was. That part went smooth for me because there's less time inside. I like to be outside. Didn't like the heat as much, but I liked it outside. Better than that. I loved working with the fueling, still do. That is my forte. I like fuel stations.
Why? What makes them so special to you? I know you're driven to gas stations, pun intended.
Pun intended, yes. I don't know why. I just like the petroleum industry. I like to be able to
It's dirty.
It is. It's dirty, smelly, messy, but I like the fact that I can go into a site or drive by a site and say I built that. And in this valley, you can do that on almost every corner.
Yes, you give me directions often by the gas stations in town.
Yeah.
I like the food establishments myself, but
Or if we were in Reno, it's 10 minutes, so
right.
you can't get lost.
Yes.
So,
Everything is 10 minutes in Reno.
I love that part of it. I loved being able to teach people and show people how things can evolve and how things can grow, how we can make things better and make it simpler for the customer and make it simpler for myself too. So doing this, I worked for a few companies, building gas stations, doing that. I worked for a couple, well, two of them are out of business now. But I don't want to describe them, but I went to work for other companies. One of the companies had me traveling. I lived in Vegas. I loved being in Vegas, but what would happen is that in order to be home in Vegas, I would have to come home on the weekends. I was working in Phoenix. I was working in Southern California. I was working in Tucson. I was working all over the West, Southern,
For someone else.
for someone else, doing their jobs. So in order to come home and be home on the weekends, I started looking for work here in town, found customers of my own that I could cultivate and grow with and do their work. So what was happening is I was working 5 days a week in Phoenix, for example, then driving home Friday night, and Saturday morning I would get up and go build a gas station here in town for 2 days. And then Monday morning drive back to Phoenix. Okay. And so driving back to Phoenix. And so eventually I got to the point where I'm saying, why am I doing this? I don't understand why you're doing this, Jerry. You need to do something different. So I thought to myself, why don't I do this for myself? And I found my first customer, and I still have my first customer from when we started. And he supported me. We built his first station. It was his seventh station, but my first for him. And it was great. It worked out really good. I made some good money.
And the initial box that you built, the initial cabinet, was that customer?
He was that customer, but not that station.
Right.
So I had built a couple of other stations for him. And then we were going through a trade show. And then going through the trade show, he saw a brown box. That was the founder of the box that we build, but not what we build. And as we were walking through the trade show, he pointed to that and says, "Can you build that?" And I said, "Well, of course I can." He said, "Okay, I'll give you the money. You build it and put it into my store." So on his next store that he was building from the ground up.
Let me ask you though, why didn't he just buy theirs? What made him want you to build it for him? What was the difference?
It's too expensive.
Yes, it was. He could get it cheaper from me because he knew that he could support it and build it, and I could do it. It would be cheaper.
And build it to the way he wanted it.
He didn't know what he wanted, but I was able to tell him what he wanted. Okay. And from this day forward, we built his the same from that day, which is 2001 is when we started the company. 2001, then I had a partner that we started the company with, and we were starting to build the boxes. I have a little joke to put in here that my wife told me that, well, how many of these is it going to take for us to be rich? And I says, well, if we build 8 boxes, we'll have $1 million. And she said, great. Okay, so we're still not at the $1 million yet, but we built a lot more than 8 boxes.
Right. That's true.
A lot more than 8 boxes. And she reminds me of that every day. Every day. She says, aren't you past 8? I says, yes, we are. So, and that's where I met Dorothy. That's where you came in.
Yeah.
That was 2003.
Yep.
When I brought Dorothy on in 2003, when the company was starting to grow a little bit, trying to sell more and trying to do more, I just needed help. And that's where Dorothy comes in.
Well, my background was banking and marketing. We met where I was helping you with your books and things like that in the beginning. And with the way the company was changing and growing and having it be small, and I'm a hands-on kind of person, and I like to understand. I'm not an electrician. I'm a money person and a marketing person, but I wanted to understand what we did in the field. So when I was talking to somebody, even though I'm not an electrician, I would have an understanding and I could still participate in the conversations.
But one of the things that you did for us is you also brought it down to where we could talk to people on a normal level so that they could understand what we were talking about, because you don't understand all the electrical terms. You don't understand amperage and voltage and what it does and
I
why
do
it does
now.
it.
I feel like I should
You
get an
do now.
honorary degree. But yes, I'm more the equalizer for the two of you when we go to meetings and when we talk to normal people, because I understand what you mean when you say certain things, and I can portray that and help break it down for them. But at the time, you forced me to go out in the field and work.
Yes, I did.
I was actually running projects and traveling and learning what the electricians did, and that was helpful. It was helpful. It was hard. It was dirty. But I'm here still, 20 years later.
And I can still remember some of the first sites you were on, too,
Yes.
to this day.
And the employees love me out there.
They do. They don't mind it.
But it was a good thing. We work from the point of, I believe we definitely had the same philosophies and ideas for business and for people, integrating, keeping it real for our employees and for our customers. It's one of those things where I believe you believe this too, where it's the customer or the employee. We don't know which one's first, so we just treat them both really well.
Yes, we always have. And they've always been a priority for us on everything that we do going forward, even to the detriment of ourselves, hurting
Sometimes.
ourselves. But that's okay, because in the end, the reward offsets
I agree.
the gain.
But I wanted to be able to share that misery with my friend's husband, Adam, who was an electrician at the time that I knew. So I introduced him to Jerry.
Yeah, I mean, what can I say? If I would have looked back 20 some years ago, I never would have thought I'd be where I'm at now in the electrical field. When I first got started, it was more of like, oh, cool, electrical work, I'll do this, I'll wire some things, and then ended up
In the
starting
snow.
out in the snow in the Midwest, learning big, huge industrial jobs, and then, of course, going to trade school, graduating that.
You need to share the story of being in the snow and when you'd leave your house. You've told that
I mean,
looking like the kid from Christmas Story.
You never stopped back in the Midwest building jobs, and some of the jobs we do were gigantic, and some of the people I used to work with were, fantastic. Learned a lot. Probably I'll never forget that company or the jobs we did. But like Dorothy said, working in the snow, you would be bundled up, and you'd be working in the snow, come back out, and you have to go back in, warm up your hands, and go back out, warm up. It was a constant back and forth. And I finally got to the point with the wife, is like, if I'm going to continue to do this, I got to move somewhere where it's warm.
But you have to remember he was only 8 at the time.
Yeah, I was young. I was young just because I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and electrical sounded fun, so I
But you
gave
were
it a whirl.
But you were a great electrician.
Well, I mean, yeah, I was a good electrician, but I
No.
also had
That's
quite a
not
few people around me that were fantastic too, that helped. I got stuck into, well, not stuck, I should say. I got into running jobs, but I had fantastic people below me that would, help me make these jobs be successful when I would do it. And, one day we're like, we're moving, and we ended up having a friend here who knew a friend at Dorothy.
The girls got
Yes.
together and we would scrapbook,
Yeah.
and that's how I met Adam, through his wife. We all
Yeah.
scrapbooked
Yeah,
together.
exactly. So
Bizarre
we moved
way
here.
to find an electrician.
We moved here because we wanted to know somebody. So we got here. I started out with a electrical contractor here just by on a whim, and then Dorothy said Jerry was hiring, so boom, boom. Here we are today, and I was in the field working, and then eventually, I would say probably when we started to switch, I not transferred, but transitioned into SSDi because it was starting to get, bigger. But I mean, I was being an electrician, and then slowly the three of us realized that SSDi, I can't remember what year it was, but it was a year where we started to grow, and then I transitioned fully into SSDi. Before it was, being out in the field, wiring and helping and that kind of stuff.
Well, SSDi, this is more about who we are and what we've done,
Right.
and where we've built this thing too. Being electricians in the field and building gas stations, and that's what we've always. When Adam came to work for me, that's what I primarily did was gas stations. Because I started in petroleum here in the valley, building the gas stations and working on them. So we continued to do that. But we saw more and more of a need of SSDi to be able other places besides just here in the valley. So we started reaching out and doing trade shows, expanding. I would I would make them drive across country in a truck with our control cabinet or box on the truck to Indianapolis.
When we first started, he and I would drive out together. He'd fly out and meet us. We'd do the trade show and then load him up. We'd fly home and he'd drive home by himself.
Yeah.
And because we stopped, because
Yeah.
I wouldn't let him drive straight through. We tried it once and
Yeah.
it was insane.
Well, and I think
know we were
some of it is being in the fueling industry. When I first got here, I didn't do any fueling at all, so I had no idea what it was. And obviously, Jerry being in the field for so long helped me learn it quickly to where I understood it and was like, oh, there's certain quirks about it, but if you break it down simple enough, it's still wiring up wires to, whether you treat a dispenser as an outlet, it's still wiring all that. So it was helpful to learn what he had known all these years.
Well, but you were easy to teach, so I have to tell you that. But the biggest thing about SSDi, again, coming from NE, because we're electricians by trade, and because we wanted to build this box for electricians so that it would be simplified so that they could understand it. So they didn't have to worry about these engineers telling them that you got to do this, this, and this because of what the requirements are. We're saying no, because we're electricians. We build these things every day. We know what these things are like, especially gas stations. Why do we need to make them complicated? Why do we need to make them so that nobody understands them? We need to make them the other way. And that's where Adam comes into the fact, and Dorothy, because, again, she would simplify it for everybody so they could understand it. We just had to put our knowledge into place where they could make it work. So we put our knowledge there. We took these boxes and we made them to what they needed to be for electricians. And then we would sell the customer on the fact of what it is so that the customer would enjoy it and see, okay, there is benefit to this.
Well, it isn't just their it isn't just their electricians. They have they have their service and their maintenance techs that we wanted them to not always have to have an electrician. Their techs could come out and make repairs. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word.
Yeah, and that's part of it. That is part of it. But building these things, because we named it Space Saver Distribution, we actually named it Space Savers because that's what it does. My original customer, one of the problems that they always had is that your back room is always full of stuff, but you can't block these panels. You can't block the electrical panels because of code. You can't do things like that. Well, when you take and you condense everything into a smaller footprint, it makes it work. And so then they get their back room back. So they get to store product on the floor or off the floor, and they can put it in their back room and make it work that way. So building all this stuff, we wanted to make it easy so an electrician could call us and say, okay, this is making noise. Well, it's a relay. Oh, yeah, that's right. We could help them through the process and help them understand that it is that simple for them to fix. And once we educated most of these people that are installing these, they're almost customers for life, or almost people that would want to come back and talk to us. And they call us now. I mean, we have one customer that does have their own maintenance department, has their own maintenance people, but the other people are calling us direct. And some of them are not even our box. They used to use our competitor, and they're calling us about what's wrong with those things because we made it simple and we answered the phone.
But they only use our box now. So
do.
those are the old
Yes,
ones that
yes.
they have to still maintain.
Yes.
Okay. Just
Yes,
wanted to clarify that.
Clarify that. So, and that's who we are. Basically, we're three people. We came together in order to keep these other two people. It needed to be rewarded, and that's how they became part of the company because they helped build this from ground one. They helped build it together and bring it up to where it is now today.
And we really complement each other. I know that a lot of companies and things, you see failures with when you have three so different people. But I believe it works just because we're diverse and we listen to each other and we come together and we believe in what we're doing.
Well, it goes back to who we are, and the philosophy of who we are is that we don't know whether our customers or our employees are first.
Right.
We just don't know.
And we aren't going to quit.
Right. So we're
It's
going to
the long
constantly,
haul.
we're going to constantly keep them in mind and keep them together so that they can do and grow. So it helps us because all three of us are like that, to make it work like that.
It's pretty crazy that three type A people that never give up and always have a very strong opinion of their own actually work well together. We've had some pretty good discussions.
There's always been heated discussions between the three of us, and it happens. But I mean, who doesn't? What company does not have that kind of discussions? But ultimately, it'll make the product better. We learn from it, and we move forward. It's just the way it is.
And as you say, they are discussions. They're not necessarily arguments. We've had arguments, but we don't. But they're not arguments. They're discussions to try and make the product and what we do better.
Well, and I think that's how we've come about. You're really good, Adam, with the R&D stuff, and that's how we've come about with so many ideas. I mean, you'll come up with one thing. It's Christmas.
Yeah.
You'll come up with one thing and have a conversation with Jerry, and then it morphs into something else and changes into, and then all of a sudden we're building other low voltage.
Yeah.
We're building new PCB boards. We're building, I mean, it just changes all the time.
Because of Adam and because of technology and because of the things that we can do, because we're not a small company, but I always think of us as a small company. But because we're so upfront or not upfront, we're constantly in front of everybody, and we're constantly being able to change our product and change how we do things. I mean, we still have our competitors that build boxes like we do, that are still building them with relays. Well, we've done away with all that stuff. We've gone to new technology that has made the box better.
More reliable,
streamlined it, and I believe easier to work on.
And easier to understand.
Yes.
Coming from my point of view, I actually, not being an electrician, I actually understand the box, which I think helps people, technicians, maintenance guys. I think it's helped in the field.
Yeah, and unfortunately, codes, technology changes, so our box is going to have to adapt to that. It's regardless of what we do now, we may not be doing it next year just because of the way things push us, customers push us. I mean, I think the biggest thing is technology pushes us to go different ways.
But
if I had it my way, it would be smaller, even more compact, but production wouldn't be happy with that because, they're set in their ways. It's good now. Then next week we'll change it and they'll get frustrated with us, but they'll move on. They'll adapt.
But what that shows is that we're a company that is always on the edge of wanting to make it better for everybody.
I think the communication and the listening to our customers and always being in that arena with them and going to their meetings and stuff, I think makes a big difference.
And staying in front of the code, because we're still contracting electrical work here in the Valley. We're still building gas stations. We're still in front of the code. We've been able as a company, both companies, been able to actually influence a lot of the NEC. We've been able to put some terminology in there that clarifies some of the things on the code that affect gas stations and that people didn't quite understand. Because of that and who we are and what we're trying to build here, I think that's basically who we are.
Goes back to being experts in the fueling field.
Yes, but listening too. Listening and wanting to be able to help people, wanting to be able to take an electrician and make him successful, whether he works for us or he works for our competitor in Iowa or in Georgia or in New York City. Makes no difference. We want them to be just as successful as we have been and are continuing to be, so that they will grow too. And that if they have a problem or they have a situation or they're going to build something new, they think of us. Now, we don't necessarily, need them to think every time, but we want them to consider that. And some of the stuff we have gotten because of that. We have been able to prove to people through our word and who we are of that what we say is what we are. We just don't change. We just don't change. I mean, if this is what we say we're going to do, we do it. We get it done.
Yeah, by no means, though, are we perfect. If we are, we wouldn't be doing this podcast right now. We'd be doing something else. So ultimately, we're going to make mistakes, but we will own up to those mistakes, and we will get those mistakes corrected.
Well, it only makes us better at what we do. Right. Every time we make a mistake, we move through it.
We learn from it.
And we learn from it.
Yeah, we learn from it. Move on and improve. Basically.
Failure is a good thing.
It is.
Because failure, if you don't fail, then you're not growing. And if you're not trying to get through adversity, and if you're not trying to overcome that stuff, you guys have all proved it to me, that we can't be who we are.
And we get stagnant.
Well, we do. If you don't have problems, if you just sit back on your haunches and say, okay, well, we're done. We built it. Here we are. No, we want to make it better.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today. If you enjoyed the show and want to be notified when new episodes get released, please subscribe to our show on your favorite listening app. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Click on the links in the show notes below. Also, your feedback would mean the world to us. Help our listeners in our trade find us by giving us 5-star rating and review in Apple Podcast or your favorite listening app. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.